Here's everything you might have missed in the Book of Boba Fett, Episode 2. Folks, if your New Year's resolution involves reading more in 2022, then you're in luck because there's a brand new chapter of the Book of Boba Fett out today. Last week in Stranger in a Strange Land, it answered some long-simmering questions about how Boba Fett escaped being a Sarlacc sand snack. It also revealed that not everyone is quite so happy that Boba Fett is trying to claim Jabba the Hutt's criminal empire for himself. Now in Episode 2, titled The Tribes of Tattooine, things are heating up like, well, anyone on the business end of Boba's flamethrower. Boba finally meets the mayor, he explores Tusken culture, and runs into some familiar faces. And we're going to break it all down, including the Easter eggs and hidden details that you might have missed in just a moment. As always, if you prefer to read all about it, we've got you covered over on Nerdist.com, but to talk about this stuff, we obviously need to spoil what happens in the Book of Boba Fett Episode 2. So if you haven't seen it yet, leave now before things get weird. Alright, let's get into it, shall we? Now, in case you're wondering if you missed anything in Episode 1, no, you didn't. Okay, fine. See that desert planet right there? That's not Arrakis, it's Tatooine. And that Rodian, voiced by Sam Witwer. You're welcome. Moving on to Episode 2, it begins with a cold open of Fennec Shand escorting the lone surviving assassin to Boba's palace, which used to be Jabba's palace, which used to be a monastery for monks of the Bomar Order. Now, we saw these monks alluded to in a previous trailer that opened with a brainwalker droid skittering across the sand. Now, upon attaining enlightenment, the monks of the Bomar Order transferred their brains into these robotic housings to enhance their mental powers by freeing themselves from those pesky meat prisons they called bodies. Now they just kind of roam around like terrifying brain bots, which, sure, do your thing, monks. Anyway, we learned that the Huttese cursing assassin works for the Order of the Night Wind. Now, as far as I can tell, this appears to be a new criminal syndicate in the galaxy far, far away. The only Night Wind in Star Wars lore that I could find is a ship from the beginning of the end, an adventure published in 1993 for Star Wars the role-playing game Supernova Supplement. While the assassin's trying to play it cool, Boba and Fennec loosen his tongue by dropping him into the pit below to feed him to the Rancor. They use a convenient button hidden in a Rancor head decoration on Boba's throne, which, in hindsight, obviously that's what that would do. Now, you may remember this as the home of Patissa, the Rancor that Jabba the Hutt kept as a pet. Now, unfortunately for Rancor lovers, Luke Skywalker did kill that monster in Return of the Jedi. Fortunately for Boba and Fennec, this assassin doesn't know that and spills the beans about who sent him, the mayor.
Shall we visit the mayor?
Now, despite not having an appointment, Boba Fett manages to see the mayor Mok Shaiz, the Ithorian politician who governs Mos Espa. Now, much like the Trandoshan emissary Doc Strassi in Episode 1, Mok Shaiz is also voiced by co-showrunner Robert Rodriguez. The mayor doesn't quite deny sending this assassin after Boba Fett, but before they can interrogate this contract killer, the mayor has one of his goons shoot him. Rather than pay Boba tribute, the mayor gives Boba some advice, a cryptic statement about the challenges of running a family, and to ask himself who really sent the Night Wind. As we find out, the family in question is the Hutt crime family, which didn't stop with Jabba. Rather, it's a lot more persistent than Boba expected. Next, our anti-heroes return to Madame Garsa's sanctuary bar, where we see some familiar faces from the first episode. An RX series droid is dealing cards to degenerate gamblers. The most famous RX droid was RX-24, a character voiced by Pee Wee Herman himself, Paul Rubens. Better known as Rex, this droid used to serve as your guide on the old version of Star Tours at Disney World and Disneyland. Nowadays, it seems like he's working as a card dealer in Mos Espa, but if you want to meet Rex in person, just head over to Oga's Cantina the next time you visit Galaxy's Edge at the Disney parks. More importantly, we get even more smooth jizz music thanks to the dulcet tones of Max Rebo, another Bith musician who may or may not have been part of Figrin Dawn and the Modal Nodes, and their astromech droid drummer. Honestly, it's just nice to see that Max Rebo didn't die during the attack on Jabba's barge during Return of the Jedi, and he's still making groovy tunes to this day. And yes, I know what you're thinking, George Lucas could have just called it jazz, but he didn't. It's canonically jizz, and there's nothing we can do about it. Moving on, we also see a wide variety of aliens, including a bat-like Chadrafan, Twi'leks, a Britaro, a Snivian, a Rodian, and a furry-looking Weasel-esque alien who kind of looks like Ralph McQuarrie's original design for Wookiees, crossed with Weasel from the Suicide Squad. Thank God Ralph McQuarrie revised that artwork because those things are absolutely terrifying. In their conversation, Boba uses the verbal high ground while invoking Mustafar to get Madame Garsa to spill the beans about who sent the Nightwind assassins. It turns out it was a mysterious pair known as the Twins. As we see, they are Jabba's cousins, members of the Hutt crime family who are trying to lay claim to their late cousin's empire. Now, these unnamed Hutt twins ride around on a massive litter like everyone keeps saying Boba should be doing. There are also some cool little details in this scene, like the way the platform bends under the Hutt's considerable girth, that poor little mouse creature that one of the twins uses uses as this sentient sweat rag, and the fact that we see a Nikto forced into servitude rather than marauding about the desert like we'll see later in the episode. And although the twins brought receipts for their late cousin's holdings, Boba is playing hardball and refuses to acknowledge their deed to the land. The Hutts then send out the single coolest character on this show so far, a badass Wookiee gladiator with spiked shoulder pads and a massive rifle. This is Black Krrsantan, aka Santi if you're Dr. Aphra. He first appeared in the 2015 comic Darth Vader #1. Boba's reference to the death pits of Dur and a sleeping Trandoshan guard seemingly references Krrsantan's past as a pit fighter who ambushed Trandoshan slavers. And much like Boba, Krrsantan used to work for Jabba the Hutt, so they've clearly crossed paths at least once before. Something tells me though their next meeting won't be quite so civil. Boba Fett tells the Hutts to go back to Nal Hutta, the swampy Hutt homeworld that first appeared in Star Wars The Clone Wars. The Hutt twins ultimately leave Boba with just threats of future violence, while Fennec reminds Boba that he would need permission to actually kill these twins. From who? Well, my best guess is the Hutt Council that governs the Hutt crime family, of which these two and Jabba were a part. From there, Boba Fett lies Boba flat and takes a back-to-bath bus so he can have even more incredibly vivid dreams about his time among the Tusken Raiders. Here, the episode takes some major inspiration from movies like Lawrence of Arabia and books like Dune as Boba proceeds to learn the ways of these desert-dwelling people. We see Boba learning how to properly fight with a gaffi stick, and much like in Lawrence of Arabia, there's even a sweet-ass train raid. Now, the hover train in question belongs to members of the Pike Syndicate, who open fire on the Tusken Raiders whenever they pass through the Dune Sea while smuggling spice and other contraband. Clearly, Tusken Raiders are protective of their land, and rightly so, because as we saw previously in The Phantom Menace, they did open fire on pod racers. Now, the Pike Syndicate attack kills Banthas and Tuskens alike, which Boba cannot abide. In order to stop the Pike Syndicate train, Boba tracks down a group of goons on speeder bikes to a local watering hole in what we can presume is Anchorhead, a small settlement that's home to Tashi Station, among other things. You know, Tashi Station, where Luke was gonna go pick up some power converters before his mean Uncle Owen made him do chores instead.
But I was going into Tashi Station to pick up some power converters.
You can waste time with your friends when your chores are done.
Now, as it turns out, the dudes on the speeder bikes are a gang of Nikto marauders. The symbol that we see on their armor and bikes, that matches the symbol scrawled on the wall of the moisture farm we saw being raided back in episode 1. Here, though, the Nikto goons mess with two characters that turn out to be some of the deepest cut Easter eggs in recent memory. This couple is Cammy and Fixer, some of Luke Skywalker's best friends, with whom he went to Tashi Station in deleted scenes in A New Hope. And based on the presence of the video game which matches those deleted scenes, this may actually be Tashi Station. Although Cammy and Fixer were cut from A New Hope, their first appearance was in the novelization of the film and the Marvel Comics adaptation of A New Hope. Now, though, they are officially canon once more, and we get a fascinating glimpse into what might have been if those scenes had remained in the original movie. After a delightful training montage of Boba Fett teaching the Tusken Raiders how to ride a speeder bike, they attack the train and take down the Pike soldiers. Of course, it's not without certain complications, including murders most foul and a spider-like engineer droid who abandons the locomotive at the most inopportune time possible. Boba discovers the Pike soldiers are transporting Sansana spice from the slave mines of Kessel, which we saw up close and personal in Solo, a Star Wars story. Much like the geriatric spice in Dune, this spice has powerful narcotic effects, and it's one of the most prized substances in the entire galaxy far, far away. Thankfully, Boba negotiates a toll to be paid to the Tusken Raiders moving forward in exchange for the Pike Syndicate safe passage through the Dune Sea. We also get confirmation that the weird rocky black eggs the Tuskens keep sipping on, they're called black melons, and they contain a milk that keeps them hydrated in the Dune Sea's punishing conditions. These black melons actually first appeared in Marvel's 2015 Star Wars #7 comic, which gives us an insight into Obi-Wan's time in the desert. But black melon isn't the only thing that Boba ingests during this episode, because after the raid, the Tusken leader gives Boba a gift, a tiny lizard, which seems like an odd gift to receive. As it turns out, this is the galaxy far, far away's version of a Ratatouille situation. The lizard crawls up Boba's nose to pilot his brain, and the Tusken leader blows some spice into Boba's face. And this is precisely the moment when the paradigm shifts from Lawrence of Arabia to the El Viaje Misterioso de Nuestro Homer episode of The Simpsons.
I have been meaning to take a spiritual journey, And I would hey! Knock it off!
Except rather than a space coyote voiced by Johnny Cash, Boba goes on a psychedelic journey in the desert where he comes upon a massive tree. Now once there, he sees dozens of beady red eyes in the darkness and hears whispering voices. We see flashbacks of a young Boba holding his father Jango's helmet, which crossfades into Boba's face appearing inside of it. We see Jango flying away from the watery world of Kamino, leaving Boba all by his lonesome. Boba also imagines himself being back in the 1,000-year-long digestive tract of the Sarlacc, a place that he definitely doesn't want to go back to. Now, as our editor Matt put it, if you want to see more of a traumatized man who grew up on a watery world, finds himself living on an inhospitable desert planet ravaged by political infighting, and after a drug-induced trip realizes he needs to become a leader among the indigenous people of said desert planet, well, I don't know, go read or watch Dune.
Long live the fighters!
Now, despite the nose lizard of it all, this sequence isn't played for laughs, because in addition to the Dune references, this seems rooted in real-world tribal traditions. For example, some Native American tribes conduct shamanic peyote rituals for religious purposes, and some indigenous tribes in South America use ayahuasca to help achieve spiritual awakening. Boba's trip seems equal parts nightmarish and cathartic, but clearly he has some deep-seated trauma that he's been repressing for a very long time. And speaking of trauma, those beady red eyes, well, the concept art in the credits depicted them as a gaggle of Jawas gathered around the tree. Maybe they were waiting to see if they could take more gear off his body, but I don't know, man, they already looted him pretty thoroughly back in episode 1. What else can you take from him? Anyway, there is a grander purpose to this exercise in expanding one's consciousness. When Boba returns, he carries a massive tree branch with him. Having completed this rite of passage, the Tuskens ceremonially wrap Boba in robes and linens, accepting him as one of their tribe. They lead Boba to a nearby craftsman who helps him transform the tree branch from his psychedelic walkabout into his very own Gothy stick, which we've seen him use in The Mandalorian and in the Book of Boba Fett. Now, the episode ends on a decidedly sweet note as Boba and another Tusken warrior practice forms of the Gothy stick in ritual fashion around the fireside. And one by one, the other members of the tribe all join in until they're performing these same movements in glorious unison. This marks the completion of Boba's transition from a stranger in a strange land to part of something bigger. And despite the fact that Boba wants to become Tatooine's biggest crime kingpin, the respect that he intends to rule with extends to people that most others would overlook, like the Tusken Raiders. Anyway, folks, there you have it. That's everything we spotted in the Book of Boba Fett Episode 2. With a thoughtful exploration of Tusken culture, unexpected homages to deleted scenes of yesteryear, and much better action set pieces than we saw in Episode 1, Episode 2 has given us plenty to dissect between now and next Wednesday. Between his lingering wounds and the newfound presence of the Hutt twins, Boba Fett's gonna have his Boba hands full when he gets out of that Bacta tank. In the meantime, we'll have plenty of deep dives into the galaxy far, far away just waiting for you over on Nerdist.com. But for now, tell us, what did you think of the Book of Boba Fett Episode 2? Did you spot anything that we missed?
What does spice look like?
Like that.
Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, make sure you stay tuned to Nerdist.com.